You see, natural selection only works with existing information. It can only select from what already exists. It has never been known to add new information. And in most cases, natural selection causes a loss of information, never a gain. So it's not a mechanism to add this new information. Now here's what some scientists have had to say about natural selection. And they say, natural selection can only act on those biological properties that already exist. It cannot create properties in order to meet adaptational needs. Now what they're saying there is it does not add new information. It only selects from what already exists. Neil Broom, in his book, How Blind is the Watchmaker, states, I would therefore argue that the very concept of natural selection as defined by the neo-Darwinist is fundamentally flawed. In other words, in many of our textbooks, they're trying to claim or hint that natural selection causes macroevolution to occur. No, it doesn't. It does not add new information. So let's look at these things called mutations now. This is supposed to be the source, according to evolution, that causes macroevolution to occur. What we're supposed to have here really is a mutation occurs that's supposed to benefit that organism. Then through natural selection, it selects just that new mutation and deselects for everything else that programs for that particular trait. So before we can select it, we have to have a new mutation that will benefit that creature. So what do we know about mutations? Well, we know we have detrimental mutations. We know we have neutral mutations. And we know we have a few beneficial mutations. But remember now, we have to have something that's going to add new information. Let's look at these different kinds of mutations. Detrimental mutations, what do they cause? Disease, sickness, and death. So no evolution there, because once you're dead, you can't evolve anymore. We know dead things don't evolve. So detrimental mutations do not cause macroevolution. They're not a source. What about neutral mutations? Well, they cause no change. Therefore, no evolution there. So now we're down to the last line here. Beneficial mutations. If we have a beneficial mutation, will it be enough to cause macroevolution? Will it be enough to cause all these new species changes? Will it be enough to grow legs on a fish? Will it be enough to turn scales into feathers? No, it won't. Because you have to have a beneficial mutation that adds information. Now, if you get a beneficial mutation that adds information, will that cause macroevolution to occur? And the answer is still no. Because you have to have a beneficial mutation that adds information that changes the morphology of that creature. It's got to select for a new change. Just having something that's beneficial that adds information, that new information has to code for changing scales into feathers or growing legs on a fish. If it doesn't do that, macroevolution still won't occur. The only way we can have macroevolution is we have to have a beneficial mutation that adds information that codes for a morphological change. Then evolution is possible. But have we ever observed any of those? Well, let's look at some of the major claims of evolution. Let's look at some of these evidences that have been used to support evolution. Each one of these now has been examples used in textbooks to support evolution. First one is called the peppered moth. Well, before the turn of the 20th century, back in the 1800s, we have all these peppered moths. And we have light-colored peppered moths, and we have dark-colored peppered moths. And the story goes that these peppered moths landed on these trees. That was the story. We found out that might not even be true either. They landed on these trees. And these trees were very light in color. And the birds like to come down and eat these peppered moths. So which ones do they see? Well, the light ones are camouflaged on the light trees, so the birds are eating up all the dark ones. So we have a large population of light-colored moths. Then the Industrial Revolution comes along, putting out all this soot and carbons, and it comes onto the trees and gets into the trees and turns these trees a little darker. Now the dark-colored pepper moths are better camouflaged. So what do the birds see? The light ones. So they start eating up all the light ones. Now we have a larger population of dark pepper moths. So we have a population shift. Is that evolution? No, it is not. Has nothing to do with evolution. They started off as peppered moths, and they ended up as peppered moths. Light and dark colored. All we had was a population shift. That's nothing more than natural selection. Survival of the fittest. Nothing to do with evolution. So a false evidence there. Then we have Darwin's finches, his birds. When he went off to the Galapagos Islands, he found these finches, different kinds of finches, isolated populations of finches. He saw finches with short beaks, fat beaks, long beaks. There's this book out called The Beak of the Finch now. It talks all about this. You start in page 1, it talks about finches. You get to the last page, guess what they're still talking about? Finches. They're still 100% finches. They're still 100% birds. And their claim was these isolated populations of finches with different kinds of beaks did not mate. Well, we found out many years ago that was false. They did mate, and they did produce fertile offspring. But that has been left out of our textbooks. Completely left out of the textbooks. We started with finches, we ended up with finches. That is not macroevolution. That is natural selection. And then we have the fruit fly. Famous case of the fruit fly, Drosophila. People like to use this as experiments because it has a very fast gestation period. It's here and it's gone. Doesn't last many days. And they go off and bombard this fruit fly with X-rays and to try and form these mutations to see if they can come out with anything better. What did they end up with? All these simulation of millions of years of mutations. They ended up with fruit flies with long wings, short wings, fat wings, no wings, red eyes. All they ended up with was deformed fruit flies incapable of surviving any better. So again, nothing new there. Then the best one they have today is bacterial resistance to antibiotics. The claim now is we spray these bacteria with all our modern antibiotics, and they turn around and laugh at us now. They're resistant. They all of a sudden become resistant, and that's proof that they're changing into something new. No, it is not. It has nothing to do with macroevolution. See, this resistance, in most all cases, is not due to mutations. See, most resistance is due to complex enzymes that inactivate the poison. It's really mostly done at the enzyme level, not at the mutation level. Now, there are some observed cases of spontaneous mutations which help cause this resistance. But in no case did it really add any new information, nor did it code for any morphological change. So, no evolution there. We're being taught wrong information again. The whole history of evolution seems to rely on teaching misleading information or leaving information out. And in some cases, this resistance was already present. And they just don't account for that. See, none of these are examples of evolution. They're all examples of genetic variation and natural selection. So, are there any beneficial mutations that have added information? Jonathan Wells, Ph.D. in molecular biology, states this. But there is no evidence that DNA mutations can provide the sorts of variation needed for evolution. There is no evidence for beneficial mutations at the level of macroevolution. But there is also no evidence at the level of what's commonly regarded as microevolution. Here's a molecular biologist saying there are no beneficial mutations that have added information. None whatsoever. You know what that means? That means evolution is completely without a mechanism. Then why should I accept evolution if they can't supply the evidence?